Welcome to another edition of Minot Talk here at the Dakotan. I am Jonathan Starr, and this week we have, or this day, because these are twice a week, we have a special guest with us, Alderwoman Lisa Olson. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning.
Yes, absolutely. On this, as we were talking about, we've had two springs now. Now we're
two
back
fake
into winter.
springs. We're back to winter.
Yeah, exactly. This snow, I didn't order it in, but it's not bad. It's part of North Dakota, and you got to enjoy it. Big news broke earlier this week. You sent out a press release. Been on council since 2010.
Yes.
And there was a decision to not run for re-election.
Yes. And, that decision came after a lot of thought. And I think you'll probably recall that I mentioned it last fall. I think I'm going to be done.
Right, yep.
And then I had a lot of people reach out to me, more than I ever anticipated. Wow. Saying, please reconsider, reconsider. And so I did. I spent a long time trying to determine if it was right for me to run one more time. And in the end, I just felt like stepping away at this point was probably the best decision I could make.
Yeah, that's a very difficult decision, especially when one of the priorities you've had, and I know that your priorities go way beyond this, but one of the blocks has been there being a woman on council.
Yes.
And now there's a chance, obviously, it's very early to speculate on this, so it does me no good to speculate on it. But without a re-election, there's not very many women in the race, let's put it that way. There's one right now. Mm-hmm. And there's other voices that you also speak to, but tell me a little bit about that. Talk a little bit about that priority right there. Why is that important for the council, and why is that important for the city?
Well, I think just perspective and diversity.
Right.
Not everyone in Minot looks the same, thinks the same, acts the same, has the same values. And so to have diversity on any representative board, I think is very important. When I first ran in 2010, Minot had gone 12 years without a woman on the council. And that's when it was a 14-member council.
Right.
So, over a decade without a woman there. And when I was elected, I was only the sixth woman in Minot's history to be elected.
Okay.
And only a handful since that time.
Right.
So I think that the perspective is important, but I don't think that gender is the one specific thing that makes people vote for an indivial. I think it's a lot more than my background and what my values are. Yeah,
for sure. And I agree with that. So I want to talk about this for a minute. We'll get into the weeds. I was like, we're probably going to be, but this is touching into the weeds. It's going just a little bit. There's no snakes in these weeds, I don't think. So Minot used to be this ward system that you kind of just referenced. Mm-hmm. You had 14 people, and it was a very big dais.
It was.
But now it's honed down to seven members, but 6 of them are alderwomen men, and then one of them is the mayor. Do you feel like it still fairly represents the citizens of Minot in that system?
I think we lost diversity when we cut the number in half.
Mm-hmm.
When I was serving on the council of 14, we only had one woman, but we had men from different backgrounds, some educators, some business leaders, some retired people. Mm-hmm. And we had, at one point, each decade, from the 20s, like 20-somethings, to 80-somethings represented.
Wow.
That was cool. I mean, that really was representative. Right now, I can't say that we have that.
Yeah, for sure. How important, and I'm diving into this, and it's something that I think is important myself. How important is it that there is this, or is there a fix to it? Is it going back to some type of representative system? How important is this, and is there a fix for it from your time on council, seeing both sides of this? Because you've already referenced it, but you served in that 14-ward system or 14-member system, and now this 6-member with mayor system.
I was opposed to cutting the number down. Yeah. Specifically because of the diversity that we saw. There was not a cost savings to the city to have us go from 14 to 7 because our salaries increased. And I know you've debated that a lot. Salaries still aren't great.
They should be better.
That aside, it was not a cost savings to the city. And I think that we lost the diversity. And I used to get phone calls during the time when we had a ward system and they'd say, "You are my representative."
Gotcha.
And I was.
Right.
It was a much smaller part of Minot, and yet I could bring the concerns from the ward to the full council. But when it came to voting on the budget or bigger items, we went through a flood with the ward system. We were still able to look at the entire community.
Right.
Pardon me. And, and still represent all of Minot.
Makes sense. Your time on council, you've been through the flood. You joined council just in time for that.
Yes. You've
been through great oil years and then some mediocre oil years and then the average that has come after that.
Yep.
Not a lot. I don't want to make it sound like it's terrible, but you've been through leadership turnover,
Yes.
whether as city manager. You guys have been through some tough decisions with city managers. And
pandemic.
Yeah, you've been through a pandemic.
Yeah.
You've been through the last year. It was I believe it was last year. It felt like it should be like 5 years because it was just a ton of stuff that happened that year. Infrastructure debates. What are lot of area that you have been able to cover through the last 15 plus years? What are some of the things that stand out to you? Some of the topics that stand out to you that you have been able to work through and help better Minot with?
Well, I think we have to go back to the flood. And I know that that's getting to be ancient history in some people's minds, but it probably was the most impactful thing that Minot has seen, in the last number of years. Because it was so kind of multi-step.
Gotcha.
We went through the disaster itself. And during that time, I was teaching, and this flood was in the summer, so I had the time to dedicate to the Emergency Operations Center.
Okay.
I would be there 12 to 18 hours a day.
Wow.
Fielding a lot of phone calls from people who had a lot of concerns. Pardon me again. And oftentimes, women would call.
Wow.
And they would say, I want to talk to you because you're going to understand what I'm going through.
Right.
I think the perspectives, again, from the disaster that was happening in the homes, how it was dividing up families, how things were being lost, all of that. I think a woman's perspective is just a little bit different.
For sure.
And so we went through the disaster, but then we had to go through the rebuilding, the healing.
Right.
And that had a lot of emotion.
Yeah.
It still does with some people. We don't hear
right.
it as much as we did. But I think being there at that time was important as a representative of the people of Minot.
Yeah. You do hear at the flood meetings. What's interesting, I haven't been to a lot. You've been to more flood meetings than I have been. But you hear the input from people that were young, that went through the flood and their parents went through the flood or whatever. And they know, I think there's probably a somewhat understanding. There's some people that went through the flood that were older that still care very much about it. But I feel like there's some younger ones that are like, my parents aren't going through another flood, most likely, but I might.
Right.
So
right.
You better make sure my house is protected or my parents' house or however this works out. Like you better make sure. So it's interesting to see that.
Well, and I think going through that is also why it's been a priority for me to continue to fund the flood project.
Right.
Because we don't want to see that happen again in Minot. And we knew at that time, and we know now, it's very expensive. But we don't want our people to go through that again.
For sure. No, that's a very difficult event. So as we look forward, and we have a lot more stuff, we're not jumping all the way to the forward and just ending. We have a lot more stuff we're going to talk about, but kind of talking about the future a little bit. What do you see some of the priorities that should stay in focus for the future of Minot, say over the next 20 years or something? You've been in it for the past 15 plus years. You know what's going on right now. What should be some of the priorities over the next 20 years or so for the city of Minot, those bigger projects?
Well, certainly completing the flood project ahead of time would be nice.
Right.
We know that we're only spending more money by delaying that. So I think that that's important. Getting NAWS completed, which we're close. We're so close. But that's been a long project. But then I think the manageable growth of Minot. When I was first elected, we were still sitting about 36, 37,000.
Right.
We'd been there for decades.
Right.
And then we saw an influx of, 10, 11, 12,000 people. that was too rapid. But we know economically that we do need some growth.
Right.
And so how can we manage that? Good economic development, good planning for housing, those kinds of things.
No, that makes sense. I'm going to ask you a question that might be hard to define. I don't know. But you mentioned completing the flood project ahead of schedule. How do we actually do that? And you know how the funding works and stuff like that. You're in the budget meetings this year already, although it's crazy how many budget meetings you guys go to in a year. But you've seen the flood budget over several years. What would be some accelerators that could happen to help complete the flood project ahead of schedule?
Well, certainly just continuing to move forward, continuing that communication with our legislators, because obviously they're a key player in the funding for the flood project.
Yeah.
Keeping that in front of them, because some of those legislators weren't aware or weren't around when the flood happened. So we have to make sure that people know the devastation that we saw, how we've recovered, but how we want to protect for the future.
Right. So is this a real concern? Like this gets thrown out there, and sometimes in politics, I think people on the sidelines especially get just tired of hearing stuff, right? You're like, okay, yeah, funny. That's not going to happen though. And then one day it does. You're like, oh, wow, that was real. The flood is sometimes, I think, one of those things, like people are like, it's not going to stop getting funded. It's not going to, the project's going to continue on. I think in the back of the minds of some people, that's where it stands, right? But you're bringing up a very good point of, understand, the legislators that were there aren't there. You have term limits, so you're going to have a turnover of every 8 years now max. People aren't familiar with these issues as much as you may think they are. Is this a real concern that potentially, and not a dire concern where everyone needs to worry and lose sleep tonight, but a concern in the future that if this is not prioritized properly, we could actually lose the funding for the flood in the future from the state?
Oh, certainly. I mean, every year or every other year when the legislators are meeting, they're looking at huge budgets, and they've made a commitment to us. But just like you said, those people will change and the decisions can change. And even on the council, I mean, we have individuals who weren't here during the flood and didn't see the impact that it was having. And so, to keep that story in front of people is vital. Yeah,
that's important. Another thing you mentioned is manageable growth. 10 to 12,000 people over just over a decade. It's a lot of people for a small town. We're not LA, where that'd be small growth. Then you have the economic development portion of that, where you begin to see Slim Chickens come to Minot. Now I heard of 7 Brews coming to Minot and different things like that popping up in Minot, which is fun and exciting, and we're thankful for those things. How do we get to a place of manageable growth? What does that actually look like? It feels like we had growth, then we stagnated a little bit and have stayed around the 47,000 mark for give or take 1,000. Like it's grown, but within reason, it's been right around that for almost 10 years, pretty close to 10 years, I believe. So what can we do? What does consistent growth look like for the city of Minot, I guess? What does that look like? Is that a population thing? Is that just expanding our infrastructure, expanding the businesses that we have to support the citizens of Minot? What does consistent growth look like for Minot?
Well, I think it's all of the above, but certainly diversifying what is bringing economic development to our community. And, we've all talked a lot about North American Iron, and we're very hopeful that that's going to have an impact. The Sentinel program will have an impact. But having our community ready with housing that's ready for families, I think that's important. Being business friendly, not having undue regulations. Those are the things that make people look at Minot and say, yeah, maybe that's a place that I would like to be. We joke about the weather, but I think that the weather really is kind of a minor factor when people are looking for a place to start a business, raise a family, all of those things. And we have to be ready. And it's not just one entity that does that. It's the whole community.
Right. No, that's true. The welcoming community, I've said it before, I'll say it again, the welcoming community is something that stood out to my family when the decision to move here was made. Diversifying. Yeah, I think we're all, I can't say the word, so I'll just choose a different word, diversifying our economy. I think we're all excited about the North American Iron Project. But then, as you said, that also brings the next step of housing. And that's that right there. I think housing and people are two of the biggest questions. And what I mean by people is the workforce. And then you go into the problem of an issue that you have been a part of and have done a lot of community work, as well as work in the community on. That's daycare.
Yes.
When you get to a workforce.
Exactly.
And those probably three things, two of them very closely tied together, really stand out as problems, pain points in Minot right now. So let's start with housing. What can be done, in your point of view, what can be done to maybe alleviate some of the housing concerns in Minot? I mean, obviously, cities isn't going to build houses, but what can be done to alleviate some of the concerns here to maybe make it more, don't want to say developer friendly, because again, you get into these weird areas of like, what does that mean? How do you be developer friendly? Some say we should pave the entire subdivision for them. Some say you get into these really weird conversations there. But how do we make it a little easier for there to be more houses popping up around Minot?
Well, and I'll say from what I've heard from others,
Yeah.
I'm not a developer, so I don't know the ins and outs of that
fair.
necessarily. But allowing the process to move a little faster.
Okay.
And I mean, I think you said tongue in cheek a little bit about, paving some roads, but maybe that is an investment that we make because we want to see the growth and we want to see it done to the standards that we expect. Because when we go back 10, 11, 12 years when Minot was growing just faster than we could imagine, we allowed some developments to be built with substandard roads, without curb and gutter, and we're paying the price now. So if we had done it the right way initially, we wouldn't be paying for it now, which of course is more expensive at this point.
Okay, so on that, developer comes in, does a subdivision, beautiful subdivision, 100 houses, and there's, I don't know how many miles of road would be for that amount, but it's not going to be accurate, but because I'm naive, 2 miles of roads, 3 miles of roads in that subdivision, okay? And then 3 years from now, or at that point when the subdivision is done, what happens to those roads? Do those get turned over? They get turned over to the city where the city has to maintain those now, right?
Yes.
Okay, so that is incredible. So, because we know that with sidewalks, that's been talked about, but the homeowner still is on Minot's Monday's city council meeting. The homeowner is still responsible for the sidewalk in front of their house. If something deteriorates there, they have to go and take care of it. But for the road, the city gets to take care of this now. So, and this may be technical, and this would have been a good question for Lance Meyer when he was on. Sadly, we can't phone him right now, but there's standards that are required for the developer to pave those roads, I would imagine, or is that somewhat true? Okay.
There are standards. However, waivers were being made during that time period too, because we needed to get houses up. We needed to get people out of hotels and into houses.
Yeah.
And so then you have a governing authority that says, it's okay this time.
Yeah.
It's all right that that we don't have curb and gutter. It's all right that the houses are 5 feet apart, whatever it is.
Yes.
Those might be a little bit of an exaggeration,
But still.
but those were things that we were discussing at the point where, normally, I know there were a few developments up on North Hill where houses were much closer together than what they typically would be. But it's like, well, okay, that's how it penciled out for the developer. We need some spaces. Okay.
Let's go. Yeah, interesting. So then, sticking on roads a little bit, do you see, and this is a question that is coming up to me now that I'm open to the idea of. Some people will kill me, not kill me, but will shoot some fiery darts at me later for that. But do you see that paving roads and not whole subdivisions? Sunset Boulevard is the best example of it. Okay, and it's almost a tired subject at this point, but it's the best example of it. Do you see paving a road like that, where it could impact a development in some way? It's a primary road. Another one is the one close to Ramstead that kind of shoots off to the bypass. There's farmland. Okay, paving roads like that might open it up where an entire subdivision would get put in, or an entire development of some type would get put in. as economic development? Do you see paving a road like that as economic development?
Yes, I do.
Got you.
I do.
Yeah.
And I'll parse out Sunset Boulevard because I think it's kind of a unicorn.
Yeah.
I mean, really, it's
Yeah.
it's a street that's been used for decades.
Right.
If the funding is available, I think that just to actually maintain the services for that neighborhood
Right.
is important. But I do believe that if we pave it, there will be
Yeah.
more development in that area, and I think we'll recoup our funds very quickly.
Right. So, okay. So let's talk about economic development for a minute then, because this is a topic we talked about on Tuesday. So I'm sorry, guys. You have the same host. We'll get better questions. But I think these are topics that are very important, though, right now for the city, because it is stuff that we're in the middle of and trying to navigate through. When we talk about economic development, we heard a good definition on Tuesday, but it might be the same exact definition. But what is economic development to you? When you think of a definition of economic development, what is that?
So I did listen to the interview,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I appreciated Alderman Pittner's answers. I'm going to go back to my teaching years a little
Yeah.
bit. So a lot of times a student would say, "That's not fair.
Okay.
That person got that, I
Right.
got this."
Yeah.
And we'd always have the discussion on what's fair and what's equal.
Right.
Okay. So fair is giving someone something when they need it. Equal is giving everybody the same thing all the time.
Right.
Economic development, I think, is more on the fair side of it.
Okay.
There are times that we need to make an investment. We need to infuse some funding into a project to get the benefits on the backside. Now, sometimes we've gotten that right, and sometimes we haven't,
Right.
because none of us have a crystal ball.
Yep.
But that's the way that I view it more, is that the potential is there, but someone needs a little boost to get it across the finish line.
Makes sense. Yeah, it goes back to former Duke coach, basketball coach Mike Krzyzewski, who went off of the principle of you don't coach every single player the same, because some are going to need different things, and that's a very fair thing. I believe that. So it's kind of a economic development kind of does have, and I understand that it does. I work in marketing, so there are curves to it. Like you can't go and you can have the same marketing plan, but you're going to have to make some adjustments to it. And economic development is a lot the same way. Do you see how do you see it being implemented if the city was to consider certain roads on an individual basis, paving it as economic development? So they became more willing to spend money, however that works, on it. How do you see that actually playing out? Is that through special assessments? Is that through just saying we will go up to 50% of the project? Obviously, you can't say that blanket. You don't know every project, but you might have some ideas better than me. So how would you see that working?
Well, again, I think it's different for everybody.
Yeah, for sure.
Sunset Boulevard is going to be different
Yep.
than someplace else.
Right.
But looking at a plan, looking at the potential, what is someone else going to bring to the table? The city doesn't need to provide everything, but what is a developer going to do? What is what houses will be supplied? We know that we're short on affordable housing.
Right.
So if someone says, "Okay, I can put up 50 homes that are going to be $250,000 or less," well, we have that need.
Yep.
That might be a good investment. So it's individual.
Comment from the comment section. Miranda Schiller, I'm so thankful for Lisa's leadership. We have been so fortunate to have her serving us over the years.
Yeah.
So
Thanks, and right back at Miranda. She's a great.
absolutely. All right. Moving directions a little bit, changing directions, getting off of economic development onto something different. There's going to be some people jumping into the race. There's already been a couple. Maybe there'll be more. It's really hard to find the name of the next person, though, right now. What are some of the qualities that you have seen? Maybe they even changed after you got into council. What is a quality that someone needs in order to be able to run for city council?
You have to be a very good listener because there are a lot of voices coming at you.
Yeah.
And you want to hear those voices.
Right.
Not everyone is good at doing that because they think, well, I have my voice and I'm going to just speak what I think is important.
Right.
But that's not representative. And so being a good listener, I think just they nicknamed me the sensible one many years
Gotcha.
ago.
Yeah.
And, I kind of wear that with pride a little bit too,
Yeah.
that I try to consider all of the different aspects of a decision and try to find the most common sense, sensible decision to fall down on.
No, that makes sense. Got to be a good listener. What about the grind of it? I mean, I think the lack of people jumping in the race at this point, there could still be many more that jump in, but at this point, just kind of probably a couple things. One is council is a tough place to be right now, and then two is it's a lot of time commitment.
It is.
It's no joke. How much do you speculate that you spend on council a week? And I know it varies throughout the year, but what would be an average?
I think you could certainly see 20 hours a week.
Okay.
So,
Minimum 20.
as a part-time job. I mean,
Yep.
It depends on what the issues are, depends on what committees you are assigned to and what
Yeah.
the committees are doing at that point. But I think average 20 hours.
20 hours a week. And that's some of that's special council meetings and some of that's being involved in the public as far as those committees or places that you should just be at. And then some of it's research because
It is.
there's a lot of research that goes into a city council meeting.
I don't think that most people understand the time commitment for the appointed committees.
Okay.
Because that really is just as much time as we put into our council work.
Yeah.
And those appointed committees are important, but they're just as time consuming.
And sometimes, not every time, but sometimes on the appointed committees, you guys are chairing the meeting.
Yes.
So it's not just knowing your perspective on everything, but you have to have a grasp of the whole situation and be the lightning pole for everything that's coming in.
Yes.
So a lot of work there. All right, I'll talk about it. See, you can talk about this topic now. This is a topic that we've talked about a lot here at the Dakotan, and I think it's important. Should the salaries be higher? You see, you can openly talk
can
about
say
this.
that.
I'll say this for the guy that used to sit over there, Kyler. We talked about that topic, and I don't know what he said, and it'll be his own words, but it was never said because he thought he was running for council. That was something that came in later. You're coming off of council. You've seen the check on the account, and you've seen the raise that had came several years ago, and now there hasn't been one for several years. Should salaries be higher for the city council, people that are putting in a lot of time, a lot of effort?
So I will say that the city of Minot elected officials are paid a lot less than our counterparts around the state, even in the county.
Yeah.
So I think to make it more equitable to what they are earning would probably be okay. And it's never popular.
Right. Yeah.
Particularly in a tough budget year where maybe we're not going to give our city employees an increase.
Right.
And then we would give ourselves an increase. I mean,
Yeah.
that just doesn't jive. But we earn a lot less than our counterparts, even in either salaries or benefits.
Yeah.
So I think that a good look at that could be helpful, and it could be enticing to some candidates. I'll just say I was incredibly fortunate when I was still working and was in an elected position that my employer gave me the time without
Right.
cutting my pay. That is
Yeah.
not necessarily the truth for everyone.
Right.
So if they need to give up salary in order to serve, or they're a business owner and because of decisions that they're making, they're losing customers, all
Yeah.
of those things need to be taken into account. And I would say, I think that they should be increased at some point.
Because otherwise it feels like you tend to really put a block or a fence around the type of people that can serve, because you're going to be targeting potentially business owners. And the only reason I say business owners is because in some ways they have more flexibility, though in some ways they have longer date. There's a give and take that goes with owning a business, I know. But you're targeting people that have very flexible schedules or very willing employers. And like you said, you're blessed. Not every employer is willing to say, well, you guys have work sessions that start at 4:30 now on a Monday, and it's not every single Monday, but you have those consistently, and it's not uncommon to get a notification that City of Minot YouTube page is going live at 2 o'clock on a Friday or something like that, because
Right.
there's a special session that's going on, and there's consistently stuff that's going on between 8 and 5 is kind of my point there, where you definitely need some employees that are working with you, or it really narrows down who can serve.
So I'll go back to a comment that I made when Alderman Mike Hayes was appointed. I will say it's a comment that I later apologized for, because I think it seemed like it was intended for him, which it was not.
Yeah.
But my point when I made the comment that we did not need another retired white male
Gotcha.
representing the city of Minot,
Yeah.
the reality is that's who is available.
Right. Yep.
And that's who has some flexibility.
Absolutely.
But that is not representative of our entire community.
Right. You just
Now,
put-
Alderman Hayes and I are fine with that, and he knew I was not sending a jab at him.
Yeah.
But, in order for younger individuals, I'm glad Kyler is running as a 20, 30 something, however old he is. That's great, but it does not, it's not available to most people. And
Right.
it's not available to a lot of women as well.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. Makes sense. Going back to salaries, if they're increased, it seems like this is a discussion, and it really hasn't come up. We're trying to make it come up, but it really hasn't come up. But it comes up maybe every decade or every 5 to 10 years, basically. Is that partly because maybe we should just go get it on a schedule where every year it has an automatic raise or something, rather than forcing the council to talk about their own salary and being really put in a very, very difficult situation there?
Right. It's an awkward situation. So in some governing authorities, that's the way it is, that the elected officials are considered employees. And so if the employees get an increase, the elected officials get an increase.
Yeah.
And same with the benefits. They get the same benefits as the employees. So that probably makes more sense.
Gotcha. Very good. We're going to go to a quick break. We'll be back in 60 seconds. Continue the conversation.
In the demanding world of oil and gas, precision, safety, and efficiency are non-negotiable. Unmanned operator drone services revolutionizes how you monitor, inspect, and manage your operations. With cutting-edge technology and expert operators, we deliver real-time data, detailed reports, and actionable insights for our valuable clients. Why risk the safety of your team or waste precious time? Our drones access even the most challenging areas with ease, reducing downtime and enhancing safety across your sites. We take the guesswork out of your projects by offering LiDAR, mapping, and inspection services so that your projects stay safe, on budget, and on time. Unmanned operator drone services, where technology meets safety, precision, and efficiency. Contact us today to elevate your operations. Yes, pun intended.
All right, we're back with Alderwoman Lisa Olson. Again, thanks for coming on today, talking about your decision to not run for re-election and kind of the state of where I can't use the state of the city because that's already used. There's actually something that goes on, and that's not what I'm not trying to interfere with that, but where you feel like the city of Minot is at. You've been a part of a few appointed committees, special committees that get set up. Basically, when there's topics that grow to a certain level, there's a decision to let's just have a committee, get some community people that are more knowledgeable about this, get them on here, and have council people that are knowledgeable about the city workings and see if there's something that the city can do to help make this work a little bit better. One of those was the childcare one, and this is a huge topic because workforce is a somewhat of a problem in Minot, in that we need more people in the workforce, and so also though we have child daycares that are filled up.
Yes.
It is very hard to get into a daycare, and it's very expensive, which is probably a separate problem in some ways. You're on this. How bad is this problem in Minot? And as you were on that committee, what are some of the things that you guys found as you went through it?
Well, I'll start out by saying, and I've said it publicly many times, I think that economic development begins and ends with childcare.
Right.
I really do believe that. So there is a huge shortage, particularly for infants. But all the way from 0 to 5, there are needs. Infants are the ones that are in greatest need because of the ratio of adults to babies. we recently participated in a survey that was done, sent out to, made available, I should say,
Right.
to residents in Minot and the Minot area who are using childcare services.
Okay.
We had responses, I believe, from 27 different zip codes. So not
Wow.
only are we seeing a crunch in Minot, but we know that some of the workforce that is coming into Minot from some of the smaller communities are bringing their children because there are not childcare facilities available in the smaller communities.
That's crazy.
So it's a little bit of a double whammy. So there is no doubt that there is a need and that it impacts our workforce. That one of the, or several of the questions were related to whether or not individuals had stepped away from a position, had not taken a position, had decided not to have more children. I mean, all of those things are impacted by childcare. So it's something that we should be focusing on. The state has taken some time to focus on it, and I appreciate that. They've made some grants available, but we're still in a crunch. And I think it needs to be a focus for a lot of people in Minot to make this better.
You have shocked me with this. This is the first time I heard of the 27 zip codes. That's just flat out incredible. I've pulled up a zip code map, and you go very far out to get to 27. Like, this is not just Velva. This is getting down into, like, potentially Garrison a little bit, potentially maybe Rugby a little bit. I understand. I don't know where all the zip codes came, so I'm high speculation there. But this is not just, oh, yeah, it's Minot and the surrounding Surrey and Max and Burlington type of deal here. This is a couple layers on top of that going out. It's a regional thing that we are kind of supplying in some way, if you would.
Exactly.
So that's huge. Okay, so difficult to get in. Infants can't get in. There's not, or they can, but there's not very many solutions for them. How, and it is definitely I agree that it's tied to economic development here. What's some of the, you guys run this committee, and I know you guys had solutions and you presented them to council, and some of them got shot down, voted down. As you kind of see over the next couple of years, what's some things that maybe need to be done in order to fix this? Because it's not a problem that's going to go away. It's one of those problems that's going to grow really probably fast, especially with some of the North American Iron, the Project Sentinel, these things that are coming in. It's going to be a problem that's not going away.
Exactly. Well, what was presented to the City Council a little over a year ago, and I think is still a good fix that the city can offer. I don't think that the city needs to be in the childcare business, but I think that we can play our part. And right now, City of Minot is the only large community in the state of North Dakota that still has property tax levied against either private or public childcare facilities.
Okay.
So I think eliminating that property tax is a little bit of a benefit, maybe an incentive for a future business owner to say, yeah, I can invest, I can do this, or keep them open.
Right.
Because even if they're saving $5,000, $10,000 a year, that's money that they can put into their childcare. It's money that they can use to employ another person, however it is. So to me, that would be the part that the city could play.
Gotcha. I see. Do you think that somewhat of this goes heavy into the economic development side? Do you think some of this plays that there's a responsibility that should be owned by the employers on the topic? Is at all, as you've talked with people, I'm sure, and had these conversations?
Oh, certainly. I mean, I don't think that we're supposed to bail out any childcare. I mean,
sure.
it's a business just like any other business. But
let me correct my question, though.
Okay.
Because I'm talking not even just childcare, because obviously those companies may need some help or whatever. But I'm talking about the companies that are causing the need for childcare, if you would.
Sure.
So we'll pick on a company that's not around anymore, Hess. Should Hess be paying somehow providing childcare or somehow helping out with this? What's your view on that in some of the conversations?
Yes, I think that would be great. And we do see that in really big companies, Google, Amazon. We know
Right.
that is occurring.
Yep.
And it might be something that they need to look at. There are some incentives from the state that would allow businesses to do that.
Okay.
Whether it's to help pay for the setup of the childcare or help pay for some employees. I don't know all of the exact details, but the state sees that as an opportunity for to kind of lighten the load on the other childcare centers.
Interesting. Do you think, or just what's your perspective? Is this going to, if we don't get this figured out, is this going to slow down the growth of Minot? What's some of the negative stuff if we don't get this figured out?
Oh, it already is slowing down the growth of Minot. We've heard that from people, anecdotally from some HR specialists with larger businesses in Minot, that they cannot draw employees to Minot because there is not adequate childcare.
Wow. That's crazy. Crazy. All right. That's one of the committees that you're on. And I'm still stuck on the 27 zip code. So,
and I think it's 27. It's pretty close. But it was,
if it's 20,
it was significant. Yes, it was significant.
I mean, Minot only has like 4 or 5 in it.
Right.
And so then after that, none of the other towns have more than 1 in it. So, I mean, you're getting far out there fast. That's not the only committee that you served on over the last 15 years. You mentioned one that you've been a part of, the Surf Valley Basin Council. I missed
Planning
one word.
Council.
There we
Yes.
go. Surf
Yep.
Valley.
Surf Basin Planning Council. There you go.
I messed it all up. Surf Basin Planning Council. Tell us a little bit about what this committee does, what the Planning Council does, and how that kind of helps Minot.
Well, I think that they are truly a hidden gem because I don't think that a lot of people in Minot know all that they offer. And when I became more aware of the things that they offer, it was because the city of Minot, through the Magic Fund, allowed some funding for the Business Accelerator Fund, which created a revolving loan fund to do some stopgap funding between what was available through the Bank of North Dakota, so that small businesses could get going. There was a lot of pushback about that because we have committed to $2 million and people are like, oh my goodness, $2 million. Well, that has just blossomed. There are, dozens and dozens of new businesses that have started because of the funding made available through the BAF. So to me, that's, as a city representative, that's the most impactful.
Gotcha.
But just the resources that they make available to entrepreneurs, the things that they are involved in as far as advocacy for business owners, for training for potential leaders. They cover a wide swath, and I'm very thankful that they're in the community, and I think that they make a big difference for a lot of business owners.
Yeah, so if someone is looking to start a business or maybe expand a business, this is a resource that they should not be overlooking.
Right, exactly.
Gotcha.
Yeah, exactly.
Very good. Very good. Okay, so stepping away from council, they have Business Accelerator Fund, Resiliency Fund, Impact Fund. So it looks like they do a lot. And one of the guys you see a lot he's associated with Prairie Skybird, and they've done well. So they've probably benefited from the fund as well.
Yes.
You're stepping away from council, obviously. I mean, it's probably retirement technically, but I don't think that retirement is the word that was used at all in the press release.
It was not. It's a break.
It's a break, exactly. So your husband, is he, well, we'll just leave that alone because I was going to ask, but I don't know all the details on that, so I won't ask that question. But basically, what's next for Alderwoman Lisa Olson without Alderwoman, without that title? What's next?
Well, certainly, and I said it in my press release, I will still stay involved in projects that I believe are important and impactful for the city of Minot. I will be a grandma. I have 11 grandchildren, and number 12 is on his or her way. We don't know. That baby will be born in May.
Someone was looking for breaking news right there. That'd probably be more breaking than anything we've ever broke here at the Dakotan.
So an organization that is really close to my heart that I've been involved with for about 20 years is called DKG International. And it's a group of women educators. And we're based in Austin, Texas, but we actually have members in 17 countries.
Okay.
And I serve on their international board representing the states and provinces of the Northwest. Mm-hmm. And so that work to support female educators, to encourage women to come into education, to do some philanthropic work through scholarships and leadership training. That's been really important to me. And as the first and only North Dakotan that's ever served in that position, I'm really proud to be able to be part of that. So that takes a little bit of my time. I do some state visits and things like that. So I'll do that. And, you know, I don't know what happens after 2 years or 4 years, because I've spent so much time in elected office that I might really miss it. I don't know. Right now, I'll just kind of ease into things, I guess.
This will be a pressure-packed question. I know you'll navigate it well, but it's a warning. 2 years from now, there's seats that are going to be opening up that will be on council probably, but also in District 38, there'll be seats it'll be time for re-election. In District 38, are you, your next step, and I understand you're not committing to anything, but your next step in a political career or journey, whatever the right word is it city council again? Is it city stuff, or is there a chance that you might be interested in some state stuff too again?
Well, I'm not going to say no to anything about that. It is part of my DNA. I like to be involved. I like to be in leadership positions that can help people. So I don't know what's next. Some people will look at me and say, gosh, she's old. She should just go away. And yet I think that no matter what your age, if you can do purposeful work, then you should do it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we're coming to the end. There's two things left that I want to talk about. One is this council's been in the back and forth fights, discussions, whatever you want to call them, over the past months, and last year I think is where it's highlighted the most. Sometimes it feels like, dude, where's the city of Minot going? Sometimes it feels like we're on the right path. You're in it every single 2 weeks at the dais, but you're in it every single day. Is the city of Minot in a good spot right now, or where are we at in your point of view?
Well, in my mind, the city of Minot, and I'm going to say, I'm going to parse it out. We have the city of Minot and we have the community of Minot.
Yep.
The city of Minot is led by incredible city staff.
Yeah.
We are in very, very capable hands with our city staff, and I think that they do a great job. Now, they get their marching orders from the council.
Right.
And right now, the council has a balance. And I think that the reason that we're seeing some of the dialogue is because there is a balance.
Yeah.
There's some differing ideas.
Right.
I'm concerned that if there are no differing ideas, that some of that discussion goes away, and perhaps it will make it a little more difficult for city staff.
Right.
Because they want what's best for the community, and they also are the subject area experts. And if they kind of get pigeonholed into areas or get micromanaged, I think that there could be concerns. I'm hopeful that that is not going to happen, but I think the potential is there.
Yeah, it is. The potential is there. I'd agree with that. I think that, you definitely want the balance. And that's one thing that people have been like, I think, sometimes taken aback. Well, if you're me, I hate conflict. I hate any type of conflict. I just hate it. And so you're hearing like, oh man, but it's really good discussion, because one side has to win. You know, one point of view. I guess it's not one side, but one point of view. Whatever points of views are being discussed, one point of view has to win, because there's a vote at the end of it.
Yes.
But the topics are thoroughly fleshed out, and you hear a lot of point of views. Sometimes maybe over fleshed out, but they're thoroughly fleshed out, and you kind of get very good understanding of what's happening. And I think that part is very, very good for the city, and so you definitely want to continue to see that happen.
I'll say on Tuesday, after I made my announcement, I did hear from a number of people, and overwhelmingly the message was, you use your voice, whether it was in favor of or opposed to something. And that's what people appreciated the most.
Right.
I was not always on the prevailing side of a vote, but their voice was heard, and they appreciated that.
That's good. So now maybe there's some things that need to be paying attention to. What about the future? When you look at Minot 20 years from now, and you leave, you've been on. Well, we'll use it. We'll make it symmetrical. You look at Minot 15 and a half years from now or so, 16 years from now. You look at Minot then, as you look forward, you've seen where it was, you see where it's going. Is the future bright, as the term goes? Is the future bright for Minot still?
I believe it is. I wouldn't stay if I didn't think that it was.
Yeah.
So when I say that there's a city of Minot and there's a community, I think that we do have a great community and we have a lot of good ideas. We have a lot of great things happening. I want and need the future to be bright, not only for myself, but for my children and grandchildren. I want this to be the place that they stay, that they work, that they live. And I believe it's there.
Very good. It's exciting. What are you going to miss the most?
Honestly, the interaction with people.
Yeah.
I think, it's
not at the dais. You're talking about in the community.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
You'll miss that too, I'm sure.
I will miss the interaction with my colleagues. I'll miss the interaction with city staff.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I can see that. Very good. One last question for you. As I say, one last question is always a trick statement, but what do you, I think you kind of already addressed it too, and I almost asked it then, but what do you hope that, or what do you feel like you'll be remembered as you kind of step away from it? What do you think the lasting thought of Lisa Olson, the Alderwoman, will be?
Again, I think that I listen to people.
Yep.
I consider their viewpoints. I didn't always agree with them.
Yeah.
But I listened and tried to advocate for what they felt it was important. I had a very sweet email from an individual on Tuesday, and she indicated that she didn't always agree with me, and I didn't always agree with her. But I was steady in my voting. I was steady in my responses. And I think that goes back to the whole sensible one thing.
Right.
So I think that'll be my legacy.
For sure. Well, really appreciate you coming on to chat about it, and we'll have to have you on in the future.
Yes, thank you.
For sure. Thank you to everyone that watched this episode of The Dakota. And we'll be back Tuesday, 9 a.m. Another Minot Talk. It's coming your way. Subscribe. Stay tuned. Thanks for watching. Have a great rest of your day.